Welcome back, guys. I am War Master Moloch, and this is Magic Masterclass, in which I take you through the laws of magic in Total War Warhammer, which spells to avoid, which to use, and how best to use them. And today I'm bringing you a guide on one of the new laws in Total War Warhammer 3, the Lore of Slaanesh. This is a lore of magic with a mix of buffs, hexes, bombardments, and one very kinky wind spell. So let's get right to it, starting with our passive. The passive for the Lore of Slaanesh is called Blissful Rapture and gives you a leadership buff of +4 and +12 melee attack while casting. This, with a 10-second duration, is an incentive to keep casting while you're in melee, which is the only option for Slaaneshi armies anyway due to the absence of range. So with that in mind, it's a good passive to have. Lash of Slaanesh is the classic Warhammer tear-shaped breath spell, which does direct damage to the enemy and also plunges the unit's formation into disarray. It costs 6 wins for a single cast and 9 for an overcast, with a good casting range of 200 meters, giving you some space to get the spell off rather than being attacked while you're doing it. It suffers from being one of those spells that does not rack up kills quickly, requiring many casts before enemies start dying. So while it's impressive to look at and theoretically cheap, it costs you a lot of wins and time to make it pay in bodies on the ground. Where it does excel though is in sundering the enemy. This spell, aimed correctly, can blast dozens of enemy infantry around the area, allowing you to either retreat a unit that has been bogged down or lay the ground for a devastating charge from one of Slaanesh's many cavalry or chariot units. So, it's not the most glamorous spell, but it does have its uses. Also, shout out for one of the best and most thematic spell animations in the series. Acquiescence is an inexpensive hex that costs 6 wins for a single cast and just 8 for the overcast. It can be used from 200 meters range and has a solid 25-second duration. It takes 24 points from the targeted unit's melee defense and a quarter of their speed, and for just 2 extra wins you can make that a 45% nerf to the enemy's speed. Now for seasoned Warhammer 2 players this doesn't look like a very exciting spell at all, but that's because most of you have not yet played as the Seducers of Slaanesh. Nakari's armies are based strongly around speed and poison, with battles that are often cat and mouse harassment affairs, a lot of charging and retreating, charge regroup, charge regroup. This means that being able to heavily nerf an enemy unit's speed and melee defense can be great for setting them up to be charged, or for stopping a fast unit from keeping up pressure upon you while you regroup for your next skirmish. Personally, I think it would be much better if this was an area of effect spell to take in more units at a time, with obviously a higher wins cost to compensate for that buff, but this spell is still useful even if it's not the most exciting. Pavan of Slaanesh is a direct damage spell for multi-entity units that costs 10 wins per single cast and a whopping 19 for the overcast. You can cast it from 100 meters out, making it one of the shorter range spells in this lore. It lasts for 15 seconds, with the overcast doubling that to 30 seconds, with a damage score of 63 to 125. It can also cause rampage in units that have taken substantial damage. This is a rare use spell for me, due largely to cost. It definitely works in terms of taking hit points from the enemy, but it's not really a killer, it's more of a tenderizer. And at 10/19 for cost, that isn't really good enough in campaign. However, I suspect it will prove pretty popular in multiplayer as a way of weakening high-end units, which is what I use it for on the rare occasions that I do use it in campaign. Hysterical Frenzy is a combat augment spell costing 8 wins for a single cast and 12 for the overcast. It buffs melee attack by 40 points and armor piercing weapon damage by 25%. The overcast then boosts that armor piercing to 50%. These are good buffs and the spell comes with a long duration of 40 seconds, so with the high armor piercing scores of the majority of Slaanesh's units, this must be an excellent spell for flanking and tearing into the enemy with a brutal rear charge, right? Well, yes. However, there's one big problem. This spell comes with a significant risk of the chosen unit rampaging. You lose control of the unit, it could potentially get killed. That's what turns this spell from an every battle regular for Slaanesh into a use only when necessary move for moments in which you're either desperate or in no danger and just want some extra efficiency in the killing. A bit of a shame, really. Slaanesh Shot is a heavy bombardment spell costing 12 wins of magic for a single cast and 18 for an overcast. It can be cast from 200 meters out and does both armor piercing damage and explosive damage with a very broad attack area. The overcast boosts the damage by 50% with a win cost that scales accordingly. However, the 50% risk of miscast makes that extra a bad investment unless you only have enough time for one last spell and need to make it a really big hit. This is the most obviously impressive spell in the whole lore, and it can really do hellacious damage for a relatively modest cost. The big drawback with it is the extremely long casting time. It's a 5-second wait during the cast with a 9-second spell duration, of which it's only raining shards for about 3 or 4, so that's 10 seconds of dead air that can result in a lot of dodges. However, when the enemy is pinned down and you can get it off without risking a dodge or friendly fire, it's a beautiful spell. Especially good for getting your lord or monster entrenched in enemy combat blobs, then dropping this on them. Phantasmagoria is an area of effect hex and the most expensive spell in the entire Lore of Slaanesh. It costs a massive 19 winds of magic for a single cast, and 25 for the overcast with a casting range of 100 meters. So what exactly do you get for that gargantuan cost? Well, it has a wide area of effect and drops enemy leadership by 16, but on top of that it also stops the enemy from moving. This makes it a kind of Net of Amintok substitute, only with an attached leadership debuff on top. It lasts for 11 seconds, which is a decent duration, but the overcast doubles that to 22 seconds. All of this sounds good, but you might be balking a little at the cost, which I can understand. It's an expensive spell. However, you have to put it in the context of a Slaanesh army, which is all about speed. Being able to stop a number of units from moving can frequently be the difference between your units escaping and being able to charge in again, or being wiped out entirely. It can be used to cover your forces during a regroup, or to pin the enemy in place for a charge. Hell, with the duration of the overcast, it could even be both. Also, if you have a lot of winds available and a blob of enemies to hit, then a combination of overcast Phantasmagoria and overcast slicing shards could prove a lethal, if insanely expensive combination. So it's pricey, but a potential battle winner. So overall, how does the Lore of Slaanesh stand up compared to other older lores? Well, there's some versatility there with basically every box ticked, from direct damage to winds, bombardments, hexes, buffs, the whole lot really. It has a really good passive, an excellent bombardment, and you start out with 2 solid and inexpensive spells for Nakari. Where it falls down though, in my opinion, is cost. Of the spells on offer, half of them are probably a bit overpriced, with Phantasmagoria, though excellent, being eye-wateringly expensive. Right now it's a decent lore, but with Slaanesh's forces also having access to the Lore of Shadows, a lot of players are probably going to be tempted to avoid it where possible and go for Shadows instead. With some cost tweaking and removing the Rampage from Hysterical Frenzy, for example, this could be a superb lore, but right now it's just passable and not up there with the likes of Fire, Shadows or Plague. Thank you for joining me for Magic Masterclass today, guys. There'll be more Warhammer 3 content coming soon, so if you're not already subscribed, now is the time. See you in the next one.